Los metan frío, coño, caballo. Fuera suerte. You're so lucky that she saved you, dog.
It's time.
crazy, huh? The blades in there. No!
I would guess probably be on the southwestern portion of the map, and there might even be a whole desert biome surrounding it, because this could be like our newer version of Paradise Palms. There's actually more text that goes along with this too. It says, I'm putting together a team, and a friend we have in common says you'd be perfect for this job. Can you share the information with your group? So I'm not really sure who this friend could be, so if you guys have any guesses, feel free to leave a comment down below. Surprisingly though, this POI doesn't even resemble the teaser that we got yesterday, because you can see the blueprint for this building seems way taller and has way more floors than like that mansion we just saw. And while people even overlaid the blueprint of the building over the Citadel, and it lines up pretty accurately. So it is possible the Citadel will change, but then again, on the blueprint, I do see some palm trees. So maybe we're just seeing it from like a different side or something. I don't really know. Let me know what you guys think. But obviously, another reason people were super excited about that teaser is because you can see a drum gun locked in a cave. And well, this makes sense because it can see that there were a ton of old mythic weapons returning in Season 4. And this includes the Zapatron, Kit's Shockwave Launcher, Ocean's Bottom mythic weapons returning in Season 4. And this includes the Zapatron, Kit's Shockwave Launcher, Ocean's Bottom shotgun, and even Tina's Kaboom Bow. So who knows if the collector will just have these on display, but I'm really hoping that we're able to use them in some way, especially considering they've...
Me too. Your snacks want a snack?
Okay, but we also can't forget the crescent section of this teaser too that looks like it's part of a mountain. And people have noticed if you overlay this on the people have noticed if you overlay this on the mountainside brutal bastion, it actually fits perfectly. People have noticed if you overlay this on the mountainside brutal bastion, it actually fits perfectly in that little section. So the crescent moon itself could be a POI too. And we'll see with crescent moons, the Battle Pass skin Luna would fit this POI perfectly because she has crescent moons all over her skin. It's just kind of weird to me because obviously the crescent moons we've been seeing have all been red, and then her skin is mainly blue. But who knows, maybe this is just going to be one of the styles, and she will also have a red style too. But yeah, with the crescent moon on her forehead, the earrings, and her crown, there is no way she's not going to be in the Battle Pass. And well guys, if we take a look at the first teaser release for Season 4, this one of course we saw the red lasers and everything, but if you take a closer look at the Fortnite text, you can see it's not just regular black text, it's actually got like little stars indicating that it's still going to be some sort of a space theme too. And well, remember I mentioned that Kit's Charge Shotgun is supposed to be returning, and if you take a look at the most popular survey concept skins that Fortnite has released, you'll see this spacesuit version of Kit is #1 on the list. I think this means there's a very good chance this will be a Battle Pass skin too. I mean, they just released a new version of Meowscles in the Battle Pass, so it's definitely possible. And I mean, everything just lines up too perfectly. And our next confirmed Battle Pass skin for Season 4 is Ahsoka Tano. It is unclear whether she is the special skin for the season or just tier 100, but believe it or not, Fortnite has teased her arrival a few times now. The first hint was during the recent Find the Force Star Wars event, where Ahsoka's was one of the rewards in the mini battle pass we were able to complete for the event. One of the rewards in the mini recent Find the Force Star Wars event, where Ahsoka's clone trooper was one of the rewards in the mini battle pass we were able to complete for the event. Then shortly after, Fortnite sent out a survey to select players that mentioned Ahsoka Tano as an option. This is important Plus the 25th, which is just a couple days after the Ahsoka show premieres on Disney Plus on August 23rd. It will be awesome if we get because from what I remember, we've already had regular how big of a role she'll have in the storyline since she will be in the live event at the end of the season. She also has a slight connection to the Astro Map too, because you can see one in the background of the new show trailer that got released. The Ahsoka show comes out on August 23rd, just 2 days before the release of Season 4 Chapter 4, and even though this probably isn't the same Astro Map as Fortnite, it further shows that she fits the theme for this season. This could also be the official introduction of Jonesy to the Seven as a legend. This was first mentioned during the Collision live event pre-show, and then later on sort of confirmed by the Fortnite news tab. After successfully helping during the Collision live event, and now the island needing his help once again, it would make sense that he's finally earned his spot on the team. Additionally, a new voice log from Sloan in this past update suggests she might be requesting the help of Jonesy too. She says, "You're the last one I want to call in on this. You know me too well for one. It will be infuriating." So some people think she's just talking to us loopers on the island, but it doesn't really make sense because we find this log in Brutal Bastion, and she's already been sending us on quests to do for her, so it wouldn't make sense for her to be saying this once again. So it seems to me that she is talking about Jonesy, and well, in that case, it wouldn't be out of the question to get him in his new 7 suit as a part of the Battle Pass. Our next Battle Pass skin is Triarch Aurora. Aurora means dawn or sunrise in Latin, which explains the bright yellow color style and makes her the perfect foil for Triarch Nox, since Nox means night in Latin. Unlike Triarch Nox though, Triarch Aurora actually has a second edit style in human form. This casual explorer outfit suggests she is going to arrive undercover on the island, but because of the gold cube she's holding, we know that she arrived with the last reality. This mural on the wall pretty much confirms it's the last reality that's coming, so it'll be interesting to see what other characters will be A lot of people think that this skin will be arriving with them because she shares that same blue gem as Triarch Aurora, and the blue gem could be representative of that blue energy coming from the Victoria. She obviously knows that she would get part of the last reality, so there's a very good chance we'll see her at some point. And well, this leads us to our third potential Battle Pass skin, the General. This awesome looking character was mistakenly revealed by a Fortnite concept artist who quickly had to delete this from his portfolio. Next to him, we see the same logos that the Chimera used, which confirms he works for the last reality too. A concept artist has never been forced to delete his work before, so clearly Fortnite did not want this revealed and was planning on using this still. It's also pretty cool that he was meant to have the power of the Chrome too, so I wonder if that will come into play at all. Someone also noticed that his armor shares a lot of similarities with the Scientist, so it would be crazy if they were actually the same person. If you didn't know, the Origin actually used to be the Cube King, so the Scientist being a part of the last reality at some point is not that far-fetched. You also got to remember the last time we saw the Scientist of the last reality at some point is not that far-fetched. You also got to remember the last time we saw the Scientist, he was consumed by the Chrome, and then later Amy found out that he's different now, so it really does all line up perfectly. As a result, Amy could finally return to the island with her new suit and be a Battle Pass skin too. We've been waiting on her to come back for a while now, and there's a good possibility she was successful in finding fighting the Scientist and the Seven, because the Foundation's mythic MK7 assault rifle is supposed to return in Season 4 as well. So guys, we have a lot more stuff to look forward to in Season 4. We've got that Halloween vampire boss for Fortnitinaires, which will probably be a Battle Pass skin too. I showed you guys some of the possibilities of that skin, Fortnitinaires, which will probably be a Battle Pass skin too. I showed you guys some of the possibilities of that skin in a previous video, so I can't wait to see who that is. We know those Escape Artist skins are supposed to be coming for that Season 2, which we thought were coming a while ago, I think, but they've been updating them, and I think they're finally ready to go. We've also got another boss that's related to those radio towers that we saw in the recent update trailer, and we've seen in the files, so those are going to replace the high card henchmen and all those guys, which means that's just at least one more mythic weapon we can expect, which is always exciting. And then remember, Mega City has those helipads which haven't been used yet, and they have been working on helicopters with launchers attached to them, so I'm really hoping that we actually get to see them in Season 4 and they don't wait for the new chapter. We've also got those armored car vehicles that henchmen are supposed to be driving around, and then there's some new guns such as the backpack minigun and the thermal toggle sniper, which we are still waiting to see in game as well. So drop a like, guys, if you're hyped for Season 4, and definitely check out this video if
I was walking with my sister. Now my sister was dressed in all Muslim garb, as were her children. And we were walking and just talking about it. Really came down. Really, I didn't want to talk. I was going to fuck them up. I was walking with my sister. And my sister was dressed in all Muslim garb, as were her children. And I was dressed as Dave Chappelle. And we were walking and just talking about something. And a car sped around the corner. And the window came down. And somebody threw a snowball and hit me right in my shoulder. I didn't know what was going on. Why was this happening? Because I'm black. Because she's Muslim. Because I'm Dave Chappelle. I couldn't tell. But again, I know it's premeditated. Because who the fuck has a snowball in a warm car? But I didn't think it all the way through, ladies. Because it went around the corner and got stopped at the red light. It was caught in the traffic. So then I ran out into the street and I just tapped on his window. And my man, can I just talk to you guys for a second? Come on out for a second. I just want to talk to you. There's 4 young white dudes in the car. They're like, just chill, bro. Just relax. I just want to talk. Now, this is an old black trick. Really, I didn't want to talk. I was going to fuck them up.
I think that's a weird fight in your world that no one else probably has. Was SM. SM25 is a coupon code any many other. Then they said you need to coin that offer. I don't think that's a weird
is Odin in God of War. So it seems some people are confused at just how powerful Odin is, since he isn't as overtly threatening as Thor or Ares. But believe me, these guys are nothing compared to the one and only Odin. Let's start with physical durability. Odin can take hits from Kratos' Leviathan axe and recover completely. Compare that to Thor, who got a permanent slash on his stomach. So basically, Odin is extremely durable and has a quick regeneration cycle. However, magical power and spellcasting is where Odin really shines. Kratos acknowledged himself how a single spell of Odin, the Black Breath, Midgard. This again acknowledges how powerful this spell actually was. Plus, of course, Odin was the one who created the mortals in the first place. The dude created a whole race of these spells. Like, Odin is easily the strongest God of War character, being beaten only by Ragnarok. It's really remarkable how downplayed he is. There are some people who seriously think he can be beat by characters like Ares.
Genders would not have seen each other on a day. You only got to see the girl, when the girl got into the carriage with her parents and you just looked in and she just looked at you like this, boom! Thunderbolt. Now she's walking with you, talking with you, studying with you. Now it'll take time. And it's good it takes time. If you have sufficient exposure, you will see, you will look at somebody carefully. And you don't go boom like that. You'll take your time and it's good. It's good that you take your time to form proper, strong relationships that last. Love's first sight was happening with
Wing qualified Tfue for the World Cup. So already he is literally 27 HP with barely any max left, and he's live in front of 1,000 viewers. And he had no stream delay when he was doing this. He gets locked in, hits a clean off. Oh, dude, you guys remember the ballers, bro? That was so cheesy. He gets chopped out right there, but he reconnects. And he has to stay calm. He beams that guy in the baller, but he's not going to get greedy. Look how smart he's playing. He's keeping himself in a decent position, and he's only dropping down when he needs to. The amount of luck that involves this endgame is actually kind of nuts. So he catches this guy's toes. Dude's going to die in Storm, I think. No, dude, he couldn't even see him, and he lined up that pump. But then, look, he's 1 HP, no mats, shoots the guy. Look. This guy's about to miss the shot of his life. Bro, missed the pump.
And alright, we're done. If you guys need anything, just call them below, otherwise I'll see you in 2 weeks or 7 days. No. What? I already got all 5. No, sir. You did. Along with the power ball. Now. Sir, I think you will. Why do you mean? One can be invincible.
The guards, get them!
Learn more about it. Have you better go to farm support? backup.
Which we've always heard true, then why was he receiving
Multiple reports this weekend. Hunter Biden's lawyers are so threatened the Justice Department with calling President Biden as a fact witness in their defense. Well, what he has to say. Right, and the lawyers were arguing that based on bringing the president, they didn't think it was worthy of bringing the president into a courtroom as a defense witness, because it would basically be a constitutional crisis. And we don't know if President Biden even would have done it, because his lawyers would most likely argue to keep him off of a witness stand for any case. But they were really putting the screws to the DOJ and saying that was going to be their next move.
Right. And Peter, in the reporting over the weekend, largely from the New York Times, essentially what it said was David Rice, who was looking into it when he was a U.S. attorney in Delaware before he became the special counsel guy, he had decided no charges would be brought against Hunter Biden until the whistleblowers. And then suddenly it's like, hey, wait a minute. And then he said, okay, we're not going to charge him with something.
And these Republicans in Congress who were calling for special counsel for a long time, because he okays what they think is a sweetheart. Biden is really going to further upset them. That he may have felt the pressure.
It's so amazing that it took Congress to go to the Republicans to do the investigation. This guy's done in 5 years. And now they're up to something $50 million to Biden-linked corporations, and they still haven't gotten all the bank records yet. You know, if you've got an explanation of how he's not even interested in the overseas business operations.
No, but to the point about the actual corruption and trying to link President Biden to any of this, that is where the Hunter side is saying they are so confident that there are no dots to connect the two, that they would put President Biden on the witness stand at great peril to him, because then, but then you got a problem. You're either testifying with a story as you know it, or you're testifying about something that you don't really understand. But if you're under oath, it just opens up all the problems. If he truly does not know anything, he probably wouldn't be calling him. But it just seems
Yeah, I was looking at that. To see what you say over
so basically, if a lawyer doesn't want
Peter, thank you very much for joining us from the White House. Lots to talk about today.
In recent developments within the U.S. presidential race, a new Emerson College poll highlights the dominance of former President Donald Trump in the Republican field, with 56% support among registered Republicans. However, the poll unveils notable shifts among other candidates. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who previously held 21% support in June, has seen a substantial drop, now tied at 10% with political newcomer Vivek Ramaswamy. Ramaswamy, a 38-year-old businessman, has surged in popularity, gaining...
Hey guys, my name is Christian Schaaf. I'm the founder of a trade supply company, and these are my quality finds.
This one as well. So in 2015, around this time, you can look back at the data in the second half of 2015. How much was each candidate spending per percentage point they had in the polls? So for Jeb Bush and Scott Walker and a bunch of these other guys last time around, it was millions of dollars per percentage point in the polls. For Donald Trump, it was in the tens of thousands. The thousands of dollars is what we're talking about in terms of paid advertising per percentage point. Now we look at it this time around, and I find this encouraging, suggests to me we're on the right track, where again, you look at the candidates in this race, if you count their super PAC dollars that are spending money on ads, millions of dollars per percentage point in the polls. For me, it's again in the tens of thousands. We're not spending boatloads of money, barely any money, on paid ads on TV or otherwise. And I think at this stage of a race, it does say something about, you know, you're on the product market fit, regardless of whether or not you're using the money to prop it up. I do think there will come a point as a realistic matter at some point in this race, and it did for Trump last time around as well. It's just, you know, part of the pill you have to swallow is just the sheer scale of reaching still the many people in this country who don't access YouTube or long-form podcasts, that still are viewing the linear medium of television. And it is just skewed to be an older voter base that, yes, that is going to be, there's going to be a time and place for that in this campaign. But that's almost, by the time you get there, you've already won if you're going in the right order. And so that's the way I'm viewing this too, is at some point we're going to need the mega money to probably pipe this all the way through. But I'm pushing that as far out down the line as we can. And I am more confident than ever that actually an outsider like me in particular in this race, can absolutely defeat the odds and win an election just as Donald Trump did last time around. And it says as much about the improved pipes that we have thanks to new media that disintermediates television, but it says something even deeper, Dr. Peterson, about the people. The people can tell when they're being lied to. And I think that we live in this moment where the government, where the media, where the establishment believes that the people can't handle the truth. It's like Jack Nicholson at the end of A Few Good Men, right? You can't handle the truth. I think the people live in a moment today, and it's the voice that I'm representing on their behalf, on our behalf, to say that, you know what, we the people can handle the truth about COVID, about the Nashville shooter manifesto, about the Hunter Biden laptop story, about what really happened on January 6th, about what really happened over the course of the last year of vaccine mandate policies. We can handle the truth. Sometimes it's ugly, but just give us the truth. And I think that that's something that, if a good thing has happened over the last 10 years through the Trump administration and otherwise, I think we have a population that was trained on knowing that they have been lied to, which means that they are badly starved, hungry for somebody, human being, a medium, etc., where they know they're at least able to get the truth or be able to tell the difference if they're being lied to or not. And I think that is a powerful moment that we live in. I mean, how special it is to be alive in a moment like this. It's like if you were alive in 1775, the spring of 1776, you'd have a lot of reasons to be upset about tyrannical government. But what did they do back then? It was a special time, a unique time to be alive. I think we're in one of those moments where it's actually a pretty unique time to be alive if we're willing to open our eyes and see it that way. And then when you have a bunch of other politicians who preach about the virtues of incremental reform, or I'm going to reform X, Y, or Z, I almost don't use the word reform anymore. I think the real choice in this election, in this moment, is do you want reform or do you want revolution? And I stand on the side of revolution, actually. I stand on the side of the American Revolution. I'm not talking about violence or anything like this. but I'm talking about a revolution of those 1776 ideals, a revival of the American Revolution itself. And in some ways, I'm far more optimistic today. Ironically, you would have thought it might have gone the other direction. I would have thought it would have gone the other direction. I'm actually more optimistic today than when I began in late February, than when you and I spoke this March. Because I believe that actually we absolutely are in a revolutionary moment. There's electricity in the air. It is a special time to be alive. And if we're able to awaken the positive instincts that come out of that, boy, do I think good things are going to happen in the next 18 months, and this election is just going to be one of them.
Are you looking for an all-in-one e-commerce to grow your business, build your own online store, manage your inventory, and accept payments from customers? Plus, Shopify offers a range of customizable themes and templates to choose from, so you can create a professional-looking store without any design experience. It even helps integrate with other popular tools to help you sell across social media platforms like TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Shopify has 24/7 support and an extensive business course library that is available to support you every step of the way. Shopify is the e-commerce platform, revolutionizing millions of businesses worldwide. If you're ready to get serious about selling, try Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/JBT. Go to shopify.com/JBT and take your business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/JBT.
Well, obviously, the fact that Kennedy's candidacy is quite popular, as well as Trump's, is an indication that that revolutionary fervor is active. Because Kennedy strikes me as much a bull in the china shop on the Democrat front as Trump was on the Republican front. And you, as you follow me regularly on Twitter, watching how you've been treated the press, and we'll discuss that at some point. But also, and it makes me curious too, you talked a fair bit about your skepticism about, let's say, the deep state, about the FBI in particular. You put forward some relatively radical propositions, and you just said that you feel that there's a kind of revolutionary fervor in the air, which in some ways is a strange thing for a conservative to say, for a Republican to say, and I know you're more on the libertarian end, so I hope you're not putting words in your mouth. What do you think it is that you're bringing to the table that's in that revolutionary spirit, and how do you defend yourself, do you think, against the danger that, radical change in and of itself, even if it's hypothetically in the proper direction, can cause its own brand of trouble, doubt about fundamental institutions and that sort of thing. So what do you think is revolutionary about your approach, and how do you think you can protect yourself against the potential excesses of the necessity for relatively radical change?
I think that there are a couple of unique attributes here for me. One is it just does take somebody who comes in as an outsider. You cannot be beholden to the existing system. One of the things that actually constrains the revolutionary impulse, and you could argue whether this is good or bad or neutral, but it's just a fact, is the influence of large donors in the Republican Party. There is a version of the world in which there's an institutionalized function that large donors play, and it's to sort of tame candidates, to get them back on a few set of accepted messages that then become eventually the agenda they use to govern. You could argue that there is a conservative function there, conserving the status quo in a way that some people may argue is good. I think that there are positives and negatives, but I think the negatives outweigh the positives greatly in the current moment. For whatever it's good, you can debate whether this is good or bad. I'm not constrained by that. I'm totally unconstrained by that because I'm not playing the mega super PAC game. I am independent. I have put, now more than the last time that we spoke, I put over $15 million for my own hard money into this campaign. And we have 70,000 plus small dollar donors. The online fundraising is now, just digital small dollar fundraising is now hit a snowball effect where it's just continuing to accelerate day by day. That's what's lifting this campaign up. And so that's one of the constraints that doesn't apply to me. That much I think is also true largely of Trump. I think it takes a unique combination though, because where Trump got tripped up with draining the swamp, gutting the deep state, is what the same members of that managerial class told him when he got into office. They told him lies, but lies that he was forced to believe because he didn't have independent knowledge to know any better, which is that you can't fire civil servants without running afoul of the civil service protections, which are these extensive laws designed to protect individual bureaucrats from firing by the U.S. president. Trump's instincts were in the right place. I actually think he was an excellent president in this regard, but he was not able to implement his own agenda. He was able to expose the problem because the people around him told him a bunch of lies. Why are they lies? Well, my suggestion is read the law. Just those civil service protections, to use one example among hundreds, those civil service protections protect against individual employee firings. They do not apply to mass layoffs. On their own terms, the law just doesn't apply to mass layoffs. Mass layoffs are absolutely what I am bringing to the DC bureaucracy. I have said that I will lay off over 75% of the federal employee bureaucrat headcount by the end of the first term, 50% by the end of the first year. And we've already offered unprecedented detail on exactly how we will do it, on which of the remaining minority employees in the FBI, minority number of employees, will move to the U.S. Marshals or to the Drug Enforcement Agency or to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Agency, which small sliver of the U.S. Department of Education will move to the U.S. Department of Labor, so that we neither need an FBI nor a Department of Education. And we can get into those details, but we're asking about a question of personal attribute. And I think that the personal attribute that really matters here is that we need a U.S. president that is at once an outsider to that system, uncaptured, unbeholden by the donor class and the managerial class, but at the same time who has a deep, personal, bone-deep understanding of how to actually get that job done, and a deep understanding of the laws and the Constitution of this country.
Okay.
That is what
Well,
I think is actually a rare combination that I'm bringing to this.
Okay, let me ask you about that, because that's very, very complicated. So, first of all, it is the case that in most large-scale institutions, a small number of people do almost all the productive work, right? That's the square root law. Okay, so if you have 10,000 employees, 100 of them are doing half the work. Now, we saw a stellar example of that in Musk's takeover of Twitter, because he dispensed with about 80% of the employees, and all he did was improve the company. Now, Musk has had extensive experience doing that sort of thing with other companies, and he's obviously able to separate the wheat from the chaff. Now, you just made the case that you would like to do the same thing, and you also said that you had a detailed plan to do so. And so what I'm very curious about is, how is it that you believe you will be able to decide who should stay and who should go? And how is it that you develop this detailed plan? What sort of analysis have you conducted that enables you to determine what should be shrunk and how, and to know that that's what's beneficial rather than damaging consequences?
So there's something we have going for us here, is that I don't have to start in a vacuum. There is this thing we call the U.S. Constitution, already proven, time-tested, to be the best operating manual for a nation and preserving liberty and human history. That's certainly my view. Well, it turns out that much of the excess we have seen came from running afoul of that operating document. So many of the administrative agencies that were created in a manner that Congress actually never gave those agencies the power to wield the power that they do. The Supreme Court has, in the last 2 years, already begun to recognize that. West Virginia versus EPA, a case where the Supreme Court held that the EPA's regulations, climate-focused regulations on the coal industry, were unconstitutional because we, the people, never gave the government that authority. And Congress, in turn, never gave that authority to this three-member agency, which nonetheless ran afoul. So if those EPA regulations are unconstitutional, then it turns out most of the federal regulations today are also unconstitutional. Turns out most of the employees implementing those regulations are actually unconstitutional. So in many ways, I don't think we have to start in some first principles whiteboard. a vacuum and say, how are we going to design and draw this up? That would be a fatal conceit. That would be hubris, setting design for failure. To think that one man, Elon Musk or myself or anybody else, it's just not going to happen. You're just destined for failure. But if you're following a time-tested framework for the operating manual for this nation, built an operating manual built in the shadow of the Declaration of Independence, the greatest mission statement for a free society in human history, well, then I think we actually are doing nothing more than implementing that which is already time-tested and proven. And so, I don't want to, short sell myself here. I'm 37 years old. I've built multiple multi-billion-dollar companies. I do understand that if somebody works for you and you can fire them, that means they don't work for you. I understand what meritocratic hiring looks like. You work for them. You're in some ways they're slaves because you're responsible for what they do without any authority to change it. So I understand these principles. But it's not that experience-based. Not Donald Trump's, not Musk's, not mine, that could be sufficient to get this right at the level of the nation. It is actually a firm understanding and commitment to the Constitution itself. And that brings me back to that rare combination. You can't rely on your advisors for that. That is not a substitute for saying, okay, I'm bringing executive experience, and then I'm going to ask my advisors how it's done within this legal framework and ask the lawyers. And I think that's the difference between me and Trump. And I think that'd be the difference between me or someone like an Elon Musk or anybody else who would be great who is great as a business builder and is a good alternative to the professional political class doing this in Washington, D.C. But I think it requires a deep intellectual, historical, principled understanding, passion for, and commitment to that Constitution to see that through, but not doing it as somebody who's coming in as just a law professor or a lawyer. They're not going to have the skill set to actually, the fortitude to cut and see that through. And that explains why we haven't had leaders to that effect yet, because that is a rare combination. Those skill sets aren't supposed to go together, right? These are different skill sets.
So why do they go together in your case?
I hope they do. I mean,
why do you think they do? What is it about your background and your interests that make it reasonable for you to make the claim that you exist at that intersection between like legal prowess, let's say, and wisdom in relationship to the Constitution and that entrepreneurial bent? What do you have on that front that, say, Trump doesn't have?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is, I'm not going to claim to be some messiah coming from on high with exactly the prescription. But what called me into this race, I mean, when you and I first started getting to know each other, I would have said we were both nuts if we were thinking about me running for U.S. president. I was driving change in the private sector. I started to try. I was writing books. That was my calling. So the thing that pulled me in, Dr. Peterson, is that I think I am the best among the lot we have now to actually bring that combination to the White House at a moment where we require it, to actually reform that administrative state we've got and bring a revolution to that administrative state that we need a unique combination to actually achieve. Because I watched where Trump fell short, I watched where Trump excelled above his lot, and so that pulled me in. So I will preface everything I'm saying by saying that I'm not going to tell you that I am some messiah and here I have arrived, okay? Far from it. But I do think I'm a product of my experiences. So first of all, I had the privilege of not growing up in money. I had the privilege of actually having to work for what I've achieved. I'm grateful for that. I did not want to be burdened, as many of my peers at places like Harvard and Yale were burdened. I do think it's a burden. By the burden of inheritance or by the burden of not having the space to actually achieve and ordain for myself what I would in my career. So I started as a scientist. I was a molecular biologist in the lab in my senior thesis all the way through college. I ended up getting into the world of biotech investing, commercial side of my brain, right? Finding opportunity where others would not. That led me to really enjoy, and I'm grateful for this more than boastful of it, just strictly grateful that I was able to find this opportunity to earn extraordinary success for myself by my mid to late 20s. I was in law school simultaneously as I was making tens of millions of dollars as a hedge fund investor by spotting opportunity, and I said, I'm going to take this to the next level. I'm going to start an entire business on finding opportunities to develop medicines that others didn't, and built a multi-billion-dollar company from scratch. And I think that's different than coming in and just managing and being appointed, rising the managerial ranks of a big corporation, sitting on a bunch of boards, and then plopping yourself into CEO when some guy retires at the age of 70. I built that company from scratch. And so that's one skill set. But actually, it was midway through my career at the hedge fund where I first started that I also had this weird native itch to study law and political philosophy. I'd been so science-centric that I actually told my bosses at the hedge fund, I said, listen, I'm going to take 3 years off. I'm going to go to law school. I'm finding reading things in my spare time that I would rather do in a more structured setting. Now, I discovered something important there, which is if you're following your passion, good things tend to happen. They said, just keep your job. They gave me far more autonomy on the job. They said, go manage this portfolio yourself and do it from New Haven if you want to. I said, great, we have a deal. And that's what I did. But for me, it's less that I have a skill set more than I have had for the last 15 years of dual passion that has given me experiences both akin to that of many legal academics, which shows up in several of my books, which have been quoted in appellate court opinions in the last 3 years. But my principal day job has still been as an entrepreneur, building enterprises, hiring and firing people accordingly.
Right.
And
So
that
you're at
calls
the
me into this.
you're at the intersection of three relatively unique domains of achievement. So one on the entrepreneurial front, one on the scientific front, and one on the legal front. And so that is, each of those levels of accomplishment are relatively rare, and the intersection is relatively staggeringly rare, let's say. How was it, do you think, and why did your interest turn from the scientific to the legal? And what aspects of the legal in particular compelled you? And then how did that transmute into a political interest?
Well, I mean, the political interest really is barely an interest at all. I feel like this is a sense of duty that pulled me into this political journey. But all the way through the legal doorstep of it, I guess I'm a person that reasons through principles. Okay, I think that science is actually founded on principles that are iteratively, we hone, and we have an approximation of the actual truth of the world. But the scientific method, driven by hypothesis-driven testing, as opposed to just purely deductive, I observed something and then I decide that that's the state of the world. That's not the way the scientific method works. It's a deeply principled understanding and approximation of the world, right? You form a hypothesis and then you test that hypothesis. You don't just sit and deductively observe the whole time. That's just pure empiricism. That's not the scientific method. And so there's something about that spoke to me. And I think that was probably why when I started my first major business, Roivant, which was a scientifically founded company, I mean, I personally oversaw the development of 5 medicines which are FDA approved today. But the business building piece of it was, the first thing I did was with the day one employees. We sat in a room for about 6 hours and came up with our first draft of what ended up being 20 business principles, right? Here are the principles on which the company would run, right? Value creation in the external world is the sole goal. Everything that happens in these 4 walls is a means to the end of what happens in the external world. Whatever's necessary is always possible. Goal. Everything that, right? Here are the draft of what ended up being 20 business principles, right? Here are the principles on which the company would run, right? Value creation in the external world is the sole goal. Everything that happens in these 4 walls is a means to the end of what happens in the external world. Whatever's necessary is always possible. I mean, we went through several iterations of that. And so for me, I think it's just the way that I think and process information. And then that is, I think, part of what drew me in my interest in the law and in the ordering. I think we're a nation deeply built foundationally on the rule of law, not the whims of man. And that's what speaks to me about much of the U.S. Constitution, about the United States of America. And so delving deep into what those principles were became just a passion of mine. It was a side hobby. I mean, the things I was reading in my spare time in my mid-20s, well, I'm a hedge fund, investor, and then, before my career as an entrepreneur, it's kind of a weird thing for a guy to do in his mid-20s and spend my weekends that way, but that's what helped me discover that I have this separate passion that drew me then to go to Yale for a few years, but it's part of what pulled me back, even out of my business career. I ran my business in a way that was tethered to those business principles. I think it's part of what allowed me to have success as an entrepreneur. But even when I felt like, okay, I've developed a drug, among other things, for prostate cancer. Now there's this cultural cancer that nobody else is working on. There are other people working on biological cancer. Nobody was working back in 2020 on the cultural cancer that I believed I had identified, which was the mixture of this wokeism with the forces of capitalism back in 2020, when I think this was really still not as well understood as it is today, to say that I'm going to step aside from my job as a biotech CEO to focus on this cultural cancer, but against the backdrop of a legal framework where it feels intuitively like something's gone wrong. It's not obvious that somebody's prosecuting this as a legal violation, but what are the principles enshrined in that law that are violated by what we're actually seeing? So that's what drew me in. And then one thing, that led me to the doorstep of this.
You were interested in science as an investigative process, and then when you set up a business, you started to understand that you needed to develop a set of guidelines that were essentially enabling principles, because that's a good way of thinking about principles or rules, rather than as restrictions, as enabling principles. And that attracted your attention to the idea of enabling principles as such. You got deeper into that, particularly on the constitutional front, and that pulled you into the legal domain. And now your claim is that you think that you and your team think that you can use your knowledge of those enabling principles, especially buttressed by your corporate and entrepreneurial experience, as a scalpel and a tool of discriminating judgment to what would you say, recreate, shrink back, and reestablish the managerial state as something more akin to what was envisioned in the Constitution. That's the gist of the argument?
That's exactly right. And I think that puts me together in a position to say, okay, now let's just intuitively, there's a lot there, right? So let's just sort of make this intuitive. What would George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and John Jay and Alexander Hamilton and James Madison say if they were walking the modern American terrain? If they were walking around Washington, D.C. on a given day, what would they say? Would they be pleased? Would they be proud? Would they be appalled? I think today, in many respects, they would be appalled by what they see. And I think their intuitive understanding, that intuition, is also part of what I'm reviving here, because they're the guys who enshrined that intuition in the form of principles that are in a document known as our U.S. Constitution today. And so for me, I think I share those intuitions. There's the intuitive side of me too. But my skill set is both as an entrepreneur and as somebody who understands principles, including legal principles. And those things don't usually go together. Now, we haven't talked about all the things that I'm awful at, okay? My artistic talents are sparse. I think that there's
Wake up to your Wawa favorites. All your favorite Sizzlies are 2 for $5. Like a sausage, egg, and cheese croissant, a bacon, egg, and cheese bagel, or try our new pancake sausage Sizzly. Grab any 2 Wawa Sizzlies for $5. Great morning start at Wawa.
How many subscriptions are you paying for? Rocket Money finds sneaky or forgotten subscriptions and makes canceling them as easy as clicking a button. Rocket Money users save over $720 a year. Here's how it works. Just open the app, go to the reoccurring tab, and here you can see all your reoccurring subscriptions. Tap on the subscription.
Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. But I do think that the unique coincidence of those talents is something that it so happens this moment calls for when we think about who we actually need in the White House to take us to the next level. And I think there's something encouraging about the moment we live in and the challenges we face. It's not Congress, it's driving the administrative state, and that's where my focus is as well, because I think that's where the skill set will be most useful.
Well, you could see that Trump was attractive to people because of his entrepreneurial background and the fact that he was an outsider, and his appeal to people's sense that things had developed at the managerial state level far too far and that needed to be disrupted. But Trump was lacking, arguably, in political experience and potentially in administrative skill, although he had been at the head of multiple successful enterprises, and so obviously had some administrative skill. I think people are attracted to DeSantis in part because he has that toughness of temperament that's characteristic of Trump. but has a better track record in terms of administrative ability. And your claim is that you have an interesting intersection of all those abilities, right? There's an entrepreneurial ability, there's an administrative ability, but then there's also that legal depth in relationship to your understanding of constitutional principles that gives you an additional edge. So let me ask you something about temptation. I've watched lots of.
I think there's one more dimension to this. There's one more dimension to this that I think is important. As I was hearing you summarize this, and I just wanted to pause because I think it might actually be the most important of all. I do think there is a fundamental difference between either running an enterprise or even running a state as a government. That is a requirement of certainly the U.S. president in the moment we live in today. Is I think an ability to articulate and deeply believe in a vision of what it means to be a citizen of this nation. So take everything you laid out, yes, I think you summarized it beautifully, but I think that is in some ways insufficient. It's a little bit still too small, because I think that's still like a resume test. And we all are, Trump, DeSantis, myself, and we're in the top 3 now in the Republican national polling, but the others 2 I would put in the same category, interviewing for a job with the American public. So, I feel like I'm in a job interview with the American public, so are the others. We should treat it that way and not take the public for granted. So that's why I'm treating this like an interview. But I think there's a third element that goes beyond just that descriptive and interestingly detailed account that you and I just went through, is this more foundational ability to articulate and believe in a vision of where we are going. And I think this is a big difference for me, and this is a generational difference, I think, Dr. Peterson. I think this is what is allowing us to reach young people in this campaign in an unprecedented way for the Republican Party. Part of that's we're using podcasts, but part of that is just a message, is that young people are, as you and I have talked about last time, hungry for a cause, hungry for direction and purpose. And what I see in the rest of the Republican Party, I'm not going to speak of any other field here, but the Republican field, what I see is a group of people who are habitually running from something. I am in this race to start leading us to something, offering an actual affirmative vision of our own. And I think we badly require that in this moment in our national history. So to take everything we talked about, the competence, the diverse skill set from being enterprising to having deep knowledge of the law, on actually the unprecedented detail we've laid out on how to reorganize and gut the administrative state, all of that. But I think the missing fuel that will allow me to see that through, but also revive a missing national identity, is having a clear answer to the question of what it means to be an American. We talk about the American Revolution. What were those ideals of the American Revolution? How do we revive them in the present? And I think we're seeing that in some ways where, look, to get in the Republican debate stage, one of the requirements was 40,000 unique donors, right? The former vice president of the U.S. just met that requirement, I'm told, in the last 24 hours. We're at over 70,000 unique donors. I've never had a political donor in my life. We didn't begin this campaign with any donor lists. But the beauty of this is 40% of those donors are first-time ever donors to the GOP in any form, and most of them are relatively young, actually. So that says something about one of the missing gaps. When I think the most important thing that I want to be saying that I did for this country when I leave office in January of 2033, that's 8 years from now. My older son won't even be in high school yet. Probably the most important thing I want to say is that we revive national pride in my 2 sons and their generation. And I think it does take someone probably of a different generation. I'm the youngest person ever to run for president in a major political party, but not just of a different generation, but of a different generational view that we're actually standing for an affirmative vision of our own, rather than just tearing down the vision of the other side. And so I just wanted to pause and say that because I think of all the things we talked about, that's probably the most important, actually.
Have you ever wondered why you're alive? You're alive because your mother gave birth to you. Sadly, this is not the story for over 64 million babies whose lives tragically ended in abortion. That's why Preborn fights every day so that at-risk infants will get a chance at life too. With the pressures of society telling mothers that their babies are just a clump of cells, it's no wonder that abortion continues at an alarming rate. Once a mother meets her baby and hears their heartbeat through ultrasound, she sees and feels that life inside of her. The majority of the time, she will choose life. When you join forces with Preborn, you bring life and love to a whole new generation, which is why Preborn and you have rescued over 28,000 babies this year alone. For just $28, you can rescue a baby. Any gift will pound $250.
Okay, well, I think that's a good addition, and I'll return to the issue of temptation via the root of youth, I think. So let's talk about that vision of the future. So this is going to be a bit of a convoluted question, because I have to wander around a bit to answer it. So I've been involved in this enterprise that's established in the UK, but has roots in Australia and Europe and the US and Canada. We're trying to formulate a positive vision of the future, and one of our principles, let's say, our suppositions, is that if your vision of the future is predicated on fear, so it's an apocalyptic vision, let's say, and you're using that fear as a means to garner power to yourself, you're not to be trusted. And this is happening most particularly, I would say, on the climate apocalypse front. And I suspect that there are any number of existential crises awaiting us in the future, as there always are. But my sense is that if you use any given crisis as the means of instilling a demoralizing fear, and the consequence of that is that you're gathering power to yourself, you're not to be trusted as an advocate of the people, and that you should be putting forward a positive vision. And we're trying to differentiate that and delineate it. And we would like to see cheap energy. We would like to see a multi-dimensional approach to environmental maintenance. We would like to see, a re-established commitment to the fundaments of the minimal necessary family. We're not very fond of corporate gigantism, but most importantly, I would say, of all those things, is that we believe that we can all be offered a positive vision of the future, so that we have something to strive for that's motivating and hopeful, instead of being enjoined to cower and destroy our own ambitions because we're something approximating a planet-destroying force. Now, I know that, the typical young man in grade 12 now is more likely to be conservative than liberal. It's not true of young women. The tide is turning on the generational front, and I think it is because young people have been force-fed so much apocalyptic doom that they've really had enough of it. And so and I see this in your tweets and your communications too, that you're trying to outline a positive vision. So, and you've laid out some of the principles. And you talk a little bit about the return to constitutional principles, but if you saw a renewed America, and by implication a renewed West, what would that renewal look like? Like, where would we be in 5 years or 10 years that's different from now, and how might you move us towards that?
I think it is an ordering of our society on things that have always grounded successful, flourishing societies throughout our human history. So the left preys on this vacuum of identity with race, gender, sexuality, and then now what you just mentioned, climate. It's serial. Once the climate farce is, and I do think that much of the agenda around it is a farce, once that's revealed and untenable, just as when the COVID-19 pandemic passed, the residual climatism filled the void. Once this farce passes and people like yourself, myself, Alex Epstein, and Bjorn Lomborg and others are playing roles in exposing this, it'll be something else that fills the void. I don't know what it is, but it'll be something. Now, I think that what I see right now is a lacking in a conservative movement that becomes too, what should I say, lazy, too satisfied, complacent, probably complacent is the right word, with just criticizing that vision and the endless hypocrisies in the nature of how uninspiring it is. It is uninspiring. But just criticizing it is also uninspiring.
And so I want us talking more and acting more on ordering a country, a nation, a society grounded in the value of each individual. A member who is a member of the family, who is a family that is embedded in a nation with commitments to that nation. And yes, I think a revival of a belief that we are one nation under God. That doesn't mean a single religion or a single, religious orthodoxy pushed from on high. In fact, I think it shouldn't be so. But broadly, individual, family, nation, God, as an affirmative alternative to race, gender, sexuality, and climate. And I think that that vision is not only more innately inspiring to young people, to all people, it is grounded in truth, right? We have distinct sources of our identity that we as lost human beings, who wander in that wilderness, biblically wander in that desert, we need something to ground us. And I think that reviving the value of the individual through hard work and the creation of what you create through hard work and the ability to be proud of that. I was talking yesterday to two entrepreneurs who are themselves already young, actually, not much older than me, multi-billionaires who are now on their next creation. I asked them, what motivates you? He didn't have an answer other than to say, hard work, actually. I believe in hard work as an ethic, and I believe in creation. That's great. I said, I need your help. I need your help in bottling that up, and I need to put that in the water across this country. But the value of hard work, the value of the family, that there is truth to having a commitment to the unit of two parents in the house with a commitment to their children first. The idea that, you know what, I will take care of my family first before I worry about the starving child in the middle of the Congo. Not to say that there's something wrong with going and helping the starving child in the middle of the Congo, but to say that there's an ordering. I am a self, that means something. I work hard and create something in the world, and I am proud of that, and I am an individual agent, not riding some tectonic plate of group identity. But there's only ever one you, Dr. Peterson. There's only ever one me. There's only ever one anyone. And that there's inherent value in the individual. The same thing I'll say is that my first commitments are to my family. The children who I brought into this world, the wife with whom I'm raising those children, the parents who brought me into this world. Those are my commitments. And then around that, I have commitments as a citizen to this nation, that I will go and visit the south side of Chicago or Kensington in the middle of Philadelphia before I go take pictures with some child in Myanmar so I can post it on my social media account and feel better about myself. I'll get to Myanmar later. I'll get to the Congo later, but I'm a citizen of this nation, and that means something to me too. So I take care of myself through my own hard work and dedication. I take care of my family. I take care of my nation, that I'm proud of these things, that I believe that we're a nation under God. And then yes, as human beings, we are all equal in the eyes of each other, because in the Christian tradition or Judeo-Christian tradition, you'll say we're made in the image of God. I'm raised in a Hindu household. We say it's that God resides in each of us, but whatever formulation it is, that there is a higher power. And then once we've taken care of all of that, then we can get to, Ethiopia or South Africa or Myanmar or wherever else one might go. But I think what we see right now is a substitution of that fact, right? Intensely worried about the climate apocalypse, or intensely worried about some fringe problem that doesn't affect your own community or your family or your nation at home, as a substitute for the actual things that in a time-tested way ground us as human beings. And so I'm still scratching the surface, but at least gives you a taste of how I view that future.
Well, I've been spending a lot of time assessing the book of Exodus, right? And part of what the book of Exodus does is lay out a psychological and social alternative to tyranny and chaos. And chaos is the desert in the Israelite sojourn. And so you can imagine two extremes of misgovernment. One would be tyrannical order, and the other would be desert chaos. And the alternative that's put forward in that book is an alternative that the Catholics in particular have referred to as subsidiarity. And it's the notion of a hierarchical identity that's both individual and social. And it very much parallels what you're describing as the essence of identity itself. Now you see a craving for this on the left because the leftists tend to prioritize hedonic impulse, right, as sort of the grounds of individual subjectivity. And then in response to the lack that produces, they leap to global identity solutions, and that would be ethnicity, race, or maybe, but what the appropriate, exactly, the appropriate alternative to that is, I think, historically speaking, the subsidiary structure that you're laying out. So you could say, well, first and foremost, you're responsible for yourself. You have to take care of yourself, and that's a duty and an obligation, but also a source of meaning, right, of meaningful strides. And if you can manage that, well, then you can embed yourself within a couple, and that's another place you can derive meaning and identity. And if the two of you can organize yourselves halfway intelligently as a mutually sacrificial couple, because you're sacrificing your short-term impulses to her well-being and vice versa, and counseling each other to do the same for yourselves, well, then maybe you can establish a family. And that's your next level of responsibility. And then maybe a community or a business enterprise, and then maybe a town, and then maybe a city or a state, and then maybe a nation. And then you said, that has to be nested under God. And that is, that's one of the pillars of Catholic social doctrine, one of the three pillars, that notion of subsidiarity. And I think it is the time-tested alternative to, top-down Tower of Babel statist centralism and the absolute inchoate chaos of the fragmented identity that we see unfolding in the world now. I think that's why this message of responsibility, by the way, is echoing so deeply with young people, particularly with young men, because meaning is to be found in that subsidiary hierarchy of responsibility, right? And it's also ethical, and you implied this. It's also ethical, oddly enough, to focus your attention first on what's local to you, right? Take care of yourself first, then take care of your wife. It doesn't mean other people aren't important, but it means that you have a hierarchy of responsibility and that you should take care of what's local and immediate before you dare or deign to presume that you're capable of doing something that's more abstract. And I know people understand.
Absolutely right. That's absolutely right. It's intuitive. It's woven into our nature as man. And I think that we are in some ways running contrary to our nature as man, which leaves a vacuum in its wake that leaves us lost, like the Israelites were in the book of Exodus. And I think that that's where we are in our modern American landscape. And so I think that there's a now very practical component of how we revive that worldview. I think there's an attitude where the things that I'm
Elise, now that we've made travel so expensive, this golf course is all ours.
How'd you get here? Kayak. They compared hundreds of travel sites to find a great deal on my flight, car, and hotel. Kayak. First one and done.
talking about individual, family, nation, God. These are, needless to say, not novel concepts. They sound novel to some when I say them now, to many, to most. And that shows you how dislocated we are right now from even the proper ordering of a society. You don't have to take a Judeo-Christian worldview. Take Aristotle. He said the same thing, basically. You go to the Hindu scriptures in ancient India, they say the same thing, right? So this is time-tested, transnational, transhistorical stuff, okay, truths. Now, the reality is I think that there's a sort of squeamishness, prudishness that make us feel in the modern American moment like we're hearkening back to something. Those are antiquated values. They're not cool. They're not the stuff of progress. I think that's a uniquely postmodern attitude, and I think one that many, especially millennials, Gen Z actually might come back to it because they're so starved, but millennials, my generation, feel like that was like not cool. And certainly if there's a boomer preaching to us as such, or a Gen Xer preaching to us as such, I think that there's a reluctance, almost a contrarian impulse, equal and opposite reaction in the other direction, a sort of natural rebellion to it. This goes back to also the special set of attributes that I think it takes in this unique moment to get this done. This is my responsibility, to make faith, family, patriotism, hard work, to make these values cool, actually, for the next generation. To make these values cool. next generation, to the way we live by those values. The example that I want to set living in the White House. I'm not some old fogey from a past generation preaching how it used to be. I'm talking about this on the campaign trail, certainly in the way that it can be. This is a progressive vision as I cast it because of how far we've come. This now becomes the stuff of progress, not regress. And I think that I know that's framing, and you could just say that's just marketing, but there's some element of marketing to the job, to get this done. Human beings have to come along.
There's some element of marketing to every job.
Yeah, and I think that's okay. I don't chafe at that. I accept it. I embrace it. Let's accept that. Part of the job of the next U.S. president is to be a successful marketer for the values, as long as you're marketing something that's good for you, that's grounded in truth, that's good for the nation. There's no shame in that. But I think that as a young person, as a guy who's still actually, this month I'm turning 38, but as a guy who's still 37, I think that there's no shame in that. I am openly saying, actually, this month I'm turning 38, but as a guy who's still 37, I think that there's no shame in that. I am openly saying, and many young people will hear me say this, and that's okay. They can be in on the marketing campaign to say that, yes, I'm marketing to you guys, but I'm marketing something that's true. These values are cool. They are meaningful. They are different. They are, today, heterodox. You want to stick it to the man? You want to be a hippie? You want to be heterodox? You want to be countercultural? Say you want to get married in a heterosexual relationship and bring kids into this world and teach them to believe in God and be patriotic and pledge allegiance to the flag. Well, that's pretty heterodox today. Put up the U.S. flag instead of the trans flag in the month of June in front of your house. Yeah, that actually is pretty heterodox today. And so it's my job to reawaken that spirit. And again, you can talk about Trump or Biden or whoever. I think there are intangibles. Yes, we can talk about the differences in having, who has the business skill set, who has the legal skill set. And these are important discussions. But I think far more important is who is going to be able to bring along a generation that is starved for purpose and meaning, but running and latching on to the superficial fast food that the other side is serving up, as opposed to serving up the more substantial fare in an appetizing format that they actually want to consume it. And I think that's something that I feel like, I'm not going to frame this as a sense that I have the unique ability to do, because then it's just more boasting, and I feel like I've been already boasting too much in this conversation. That's not the point. It is something that I have a responsibility to do. I have a duty to do as a member of my generation and somebody who can do this. With that comes a duty to do it right now. And that's the sense of duty that I feel right now.
I'm extremely pleased to announce that Daily Wire Plus has decided to make the 16-part Exodus seminar fully and freely available to everyone over the next 4 months on YouTube. They're fully and freely available, has decided to make the 16-part I'm extremely pleased to announce that Daily Wire Plus has decided to make the 16-part Exodus seminar fully and freely available to everyone over the next 4 months on YouTube. We are, therefore, truly beyond pleased to invite you all most hospitably to partake in this great moral banquet. So let me ask you the other question that has emerged in my mind as we've been talking. So, for most of my career, I was a popular professor, and I had a little bit of exposure on the broader public front. I worked with a small television station in Ontario, and so I had a taste of public recognition, let's say. I would say, to some degree, against some of the excesses that might otherwise be associated with that. I had a very established family and long-term friends who were accomplished in their own right, and like a phalanx of people around me who could counsel me carefully as my star rose, so to speak. Now, you're a young man, and you've been very successful on multiple fronts and for a very long time, and you've garnered great wealth. You've had a lot of entrepreneurial adventures. now you're running a very public candidacy for presidency, but you're 37. And so one of the things, we talked already about the temptations that you faced on the campaign front with regard to the advice that you were receiving from the political class and how you withstood that. And I guess I'm curious, and I think this is probably the therapist in me, thinking about someone who's in your situation, is like, and you've provided a partial answer in your understanding that you have a responsibility at all these levels of social embeddedness. But how do you keep your ego from running away from you, given the particulars of your situation in combination with your youth? Like, what do you have around you that keeps your feet on the ground, do you think, or around you or within you?
Honestly, it's very practical and simple. The first thing is my family. I actually am pretty grateful to, I hope you didn't mind me mentioning this, but the best piece of advice I got at the start of this campaign was just like very practical advice from Tucker Carlson. Okay, Tucker told me, it's just like very practical stuff. He said, travel with your family. Take your bubble that you live in with you, right? Because, at some point you're gonna show up on the road and you're just gonna be floating in the ether and waking up in some hotel asking, okay, where am I? And I'm just floating and going through the motions. You're gonna feel like that at some point in this campaign. And here's how you protect yourself against that. Whatever you have at home, just take it with you. Or when you don't take it with you, just make it a rule that you want to come back and spend as many nights at home sleeping in your own bed as possible. I came home at 11:30 last night. A few nights ago, it was 2 a.m. when I got back from Iowa. Oh, actually, where was it coming from? That was New Hampshire, excuse me. Lose track where I'm coming from. But it's 2 a.m. But I still made a point to come back rather than to sleep the night over there, because just as a very practical point, there's nothing philosophical about this, it grounds me. I wake up that next morning to the sound of my young son crying, and it annoys you at first for the first split second, and then it's just joy after that, which is like, that's what you wake up to in the morning. And I think that we're traveling as much as we can as a family. Now my wife has her own version of this, which I wouldn't say is in conflict, but has some logistical attributes that we have to balance, which is her version of also part of staying grounded in a journey that she did not sign up for. She does not covet attention. She doesn't hide from, I don't know if you've ever seen her, she's very earnest and connects with people at a level sometimes that's even deeper than I do with many audiences. And she's not shy about it, but she doesn't covet it in any sense, certainly doesn't seek it. The thing that keeps her grounded is, in addition to our family unit, which is important to her, is she made a decision that I admire her for keeping, is she's kept her full-time job through this, and it is not a lightweight's full-time job. She is a throat surgeon. She literally saved lives of people who have gone through cancer at the Ohio Cancer Center, at the James Hospital at the Ohio State University. People have been through head and neck cancer, the consequences of that. She's a throat surgeon, the best, one of the best in the world, certainly at the narrow domain she's in. She has people who fly here to see her. She keeps her operating room schedule. And so, let's say I'm in Iowa on a Friday night. There have been cases where days where she will do 12 cases in the day and still be at a dinner event where we're both speaking in Iowa that night. And so for each of us, it's, I think, the practical steps, actually. I think and this is where I'm so grateful to Tucker, actually. I launched the campaign actually on his show, and it was just in the chit chat that we had after that I got like probably the best practical tip that I have since used throughout this campaign, which is as simple as this: whenever you can, just make it a rule. We will travel with our family as a family unit. Whenever that is possible, that is just what we will do. When that is not possible, because Apurva has to stay in Columbus, Ohio, maybe I'll get one-on-one time with Karthik. She'll stay with Arjun. And when it's not possible for the kids to come, when it would be too taxing for them, or they have their activities, I will make an effort, and even if it's 2 a.m., I will be back home in this house where I'm talking to you from. And maybe I'll get an hour less sleep, but I'll be more grateful for it in the morning when I wake up the next day.
Well, that harkens back to this issue and idea of embedded responsibility that we already discussed. So one of the what you call it, errors that the psychotherapeutic community has foisted on the general public, and I think this is true even of the greatest therapists, is the idea that your sanity is something that's somehow located in you. And I don't think that's true. Like, I think your sanity is the harmony that's established between your multiple levels of social embeddedness. And so when you abide by Carlson's advice to take your wife and your children along with you, you're actually taking the structure of responsibility that reminds you to be sane along with you, right? And because we all need to be tapped into harmony and unity. And you do that, not so much, some of it's abiding by your own principles, it's internal, it's pure force of will, but as Carlson pointed out, you can wake up after a month on the road, you're kind of lost and suspended in space, and that's also the sort of time where a moral error of one form or another is much more likely to occur. But if you're in constant communication with those embedded levels of responsibility, that also keeps you on track, right, in that conservative manner that is part and parcel of secure sanity. And that's another advantage to adopting social responsibility, right, is you surround yourself with people who remind you to be sane.
Yeah, because I don't know about other people, but I'm not a perfect person or endowed with some sort of divine, infallibility in the decisions that we make. And so we just put ourselves in a position to make the moral decision at every step. It's not, I didn't invent this. My parents demonstrated it by example to me, and I suppose they didn't invent it. It's societies throughout human history in our faith-based tradition. I mean, the Hindu way of life, just as the Judeo-Christian way of life, puts a great premium on this institution of the family. And so I think it actually comes down to just being that practical about it rather than to be overly abstract. It's like, you and I talked about the bats in the cave, I think. I certainly see myself, all of us, I think my generation, maybe all of us as Americans, as human beings today, like blind bats, lost in a cave, right? And the bat, how does it figure out where it is in that cave? It sends out an echolocation signal that bounces back off the wall, and then it comes back and it says, this is where I am. So if we human beings are doing the same thing, this is my family, that's true, that bounces back, it says, this is where I am. I believe in God, I'm a citizen of this nation. Those things come back and say, this is where I am. When those things disappear or they're distant, what happens? We send out these signals, and then nothing comes back. And we're back in the desert. We're back to being the Israelites in the book of Exodus. We're back to being Americans in 2023. And so...
Yeah, well, that's part of that problem of overemphasis on subjective self-identity.
Right.
This is a terrible thing that the radicals on the left have done to people psychologically, is to tell them, you are only what you claim to be. It's like, well, no, that's not true. You're what you've been able to negotiate with other people. And that's a damn good thing for you, too, because as you pointed out about yourself, like, isolated and alone, there's no indication at all that we'd be other than, maximally sinful in the direction of our greatest weakness. We need other people, and part of our identity is the ability to integrate ourselves with other people and to use them as signaling devices for our own orientation, as you pointed out. That's a deep psychological truth, and it is practical in the way that you described too, right? It's you distribute the responsibility for your sanity to the community that you take responsibility for, and that works. And that's not an internal or psychological phenomenon. That's a phenomenon. That's a social phenomenon. And that's one thing the conservatives knew, I would say, in their conservative philosophy, that the liberals, who are hyper-individualistic, miss
rare in human history that walk this earth. Maybe they don't need that. They're on a higher plane than people like me. I think that ordinary people like me, need that grounding in order to have my grounding in who I am, avoid moral error, as you put it. I think that's an important insight in all of this as well. It might be why you see instances of moral error more often from people who do put themselves in the position to wake up in a given day and not know where I am or feel lost in this aimless passage of time. And so, I guess I don't want to discount the possibility that there are a rare few people out there who independently could find that for themselves.
without creating the structures around them, from family to nation to God and belief in God, to ground themselves in these things. But I certainly think that I am like most people in that, yes, I do need it, we do need it. And part of what we do is, there's this old expression where you practice what you preach. I actually feel that what I'm doing much of in this campaign is, it's not that I'm doing that because I'm practicing what I'm preaching. It's the reverse. I'm just actually in this campaign preaching what I practice. And I would like to actually share that privilege. I'll use the word, the P word. I would like to share that privilege with everyone in this nation, with certainly every kid in this nation, to enjoy the ultimate privilege that I had as a kid. Which is not that I grew up I did not actually, but I grew up with two parents in the house with a focus on education, a focus on the family unit, a focus on God. Now my kids, they are growing up in much greater wealth than I did, but that's not the attribute that makes the difference. We're doing our best to give them that same privilege. Two parents in the house, 2 a.m. or not, two parents in the house with a focus on education, on a focus on the family unit, with a focus and a belief in God. And why, if I'm aiming to lead this country, why would I want anything other than to share that same privilege with every other kid who's growing up in this country as well? Does that mean that one of the 25% of kids, and it is that high, who are born into fatherless homes or raised in fatherless homes today, don't have a shot at achieving everything that I have or people like me have in my life? No. No, in fact, if I'm speaking to one of those kids, I will say that in your unique experience, there is still sources of strength that you will be able to find. It doesn't have to be exactly what mine was. Would we have gotten out of war? Would we have won World War II if FDR didn't have polio? I don't know, actually. I just, it's a weird question to ask, but I don't know. But does that mean we wish polio upon every U.S. president or every citizen because that's how we protect ourselves? No. And so both of these things can be true at once, that when you encounter hardship, you don't have to be victimized by it. You still can derive at an individual level fortitude from it, because if it isn't the two-parent household, then it can be something else that grounds you. But that also should stop us short of saying, oh, well, because somebody else can do it or did do it, that we should wish polio in the FDR analogy case, or a single-parent household in the case of a quarter of people in this country's case, upon everybody else. No. And I think that both of those things can be true at once. And so what I'm saying here, I want to be very careful that that doesn't negate hope or possibility for that.
No, I think you made that very clear. What do you think you've done, or your wife has done, or both of you have done, that makes your marriage work? Like, how long have you been married first? Why do you think your marriage could sustain the pressures of an extended campaign and then a potential presidency? Because that's a hell of a lot to ask for any bond to maintain that many transformations. What do you guys that could, let's say, speak to the confidence in the integrity of the commitments that you've made on the family front?
Well, I would say that the superficial answer is we just got very lucky. The deeper answer is I think we chose well. The true answer is I think that we were set up by fate, I think by God, to be in this marriage with one another. I mean, I've never met and will never meet somebody in my life who pushes me. And I think it's the push actually between us, right? I think that Apurva, she pushes me to be the best version of myself. The only person more unforgiving of my failure to be the best version of myself than me, I'm very unforgiving of myself, but there's one person even more unforgiving and unsparing, and that's Apurva. And I return the favor to her. And I think that push.
How do you do that without alienating each other? How do you do that without alienating each other?
I think it is, well, occasionally there will be spikes in moments of insecurity.
Yeah.
But the lack of alienation doesn't actually come from the without. That comes from within, right? So when you have somebody who loves you and is pushing you to be the best version of yourself because they know that they can expect more of you, and then you lash out at them, as I, on occasion, may in my weaker moments do, that is actually an insecurity in me. And I think that my ability to at least see that is part of what, and she helps me see it, right? Understands enough of me to understand what those moments of insecurity are, to just say, okay, he didn't mean what he just said, but we're going to actually get to the bottom of this. That's actually been, for us, a very different way that might not be working for everybody else. It's not just like two magnets that are automatically stuck. That's been the result of it. It's actually two people who are in a constant cooperative struggle in pushing one another to be the best version of ourselves. And I think that's the way I would describe it. I think actually that cooperative tension is part of what actually keeps our marriage and our family unit so deeply steel level strong. And I think that is.
I think Ben Shapiro.
I don't think we would have found it.
Shapiro told me that the Hebrew word for Eve means beneficial adversary, and it means optimized player. It means something like optimized player in a challenging game. Right? So that's
the best description of it. That's exactly how it feels. You caught me in trying to describe it. I have a feeling it's hard to capture in words.
Yeah.
You just captured it in words. That is it. And it just actually raises another one of these kind of conservative values that's a little bit uncouth maybe to talk about, or you're not supposed to, it's beyond the pale to talk about right now, but it's just the importance of choosing who you marry and choosing very well, and almost the responsibility that I'm grateful that my parents, Apurva's parents, both exercised in making sure that they were, filtering for making sure, understanding their kid probably better than anybody else. That's something that I think many parents abdicate today, is to say that, I think he would find somebody more matched for him, but at least he's happy, or at least she's happy. You're studying Exodus, but this might be more of a Genesis example. I think it's probably late in the book of Genesis when Abraham sends his servant after he has him put his hand under his thigh for the moment of commitment. That was just how they make commitments. After he has him put his hand under his thigh for the moment of commitment. That was just how they make. When Abraham sends his servant, after he has him put his hand under his thigh for the moment of commitment. That was just how they make commitments back then. We don't put people's hands under their thighs now, but that was, I think, the biblical version of a solid commitment. To say, go back all the way over there to our homeland to find the proper spouse for my son Isaac, he was the son that God asked him to sacrifice. He didn't have to sacrifice. It was important to him to know that he went all the way there. And what if I come back empty-handed? He said, you will not come back empty-handed. If you do, I will relieve you of your promise. But do not come back empty-handed. And I do not want her marrying someone, Canaanite or something like this. So he brings back Rebecca. And I think it's just a beautiful story of the importance of parental, it doesn't always have to be this way, but the spirit of it at least is, if it's not a parent, it's someone close to you, maybe it's a best friend, but who really cares enough about you to say that maybe that's not the right person. And what I will tell you is, in the period that Apurva and I were dating, pragmatically we knew we were going to get married, but we were waiting for her to finish medical school, and by the pragmatism of all of that, if I was to do it again, we would have just got married sooner and just be done with it. We don't have to have a big ceremony about it. But we started in 2011. We got married in 2015. There wasn't one person who cared about either of us who would have looked and said, maybe you want to take a step back and take it a little bit slower. But if the people around me who know me best, they would have stepped up, including my parents and family members and my brother and my best friends. They would have stepped up and said, hey, this is are you sure you want to go this fast? Take it slow. Not a single person around me said it because they knew it was right. But I think it also just highlights the importance of, we could say we got lucky, but I think that actually it was the fabric around us, each of us, that helped us get it right too. And so I think even the importance of who you choose in your marriage, I mean, the Bible has a lot to say about this. Hindu tradition has a lot to say about this. My parents have a lot to say about this. And if you asked me 20 years ago, I would never be saying this right now, but I think that actually there is a role for family members to play.
That's a wise role for wise counsel.
It is, yeah. I enjoyed that, and I thankfully am eternally grateful that I was blessed with the wife that I have now. That was not a product of accident. It was actually a product of circumstance.
Why do you think she supports your? I've seen many couples compete with each other and interfere with each other's progress forward, sometimes out of spite and jealousy and hidden resentment and bitterness. And your wife appears to be on board with your ambitions or with your joint ambitions. Like what? And you said that you have a child. She has maternal responsibilities, but she's maintained this difficult career. She's obviously balancing that with the support she's providing you for your complex endeavor. Why does she support what you're doing?
I think that she and I both share this in common, is that we don't view this as balance, in a certain sense. If we were going to view this as a game of balancing competing responsibilities, no chance. Because, just think about the endeavor I'm on with 2 young kids at home. I've built businesses and everything else, but this is another scale altogether. At the age of 37 with a wife who's a full-time surgeon, if we're playing the game of balancing, there's no balance in this. That ball game's out. I think it is because it is part of a shared project of asking ourselves, how do we make the most of the short time we're given on this earth? There's more to our life. We agree on this. There's more to life than the aimless passage of time. We were put here for a purpose. I think that my wife, Barbara, she shares a conviction that I was put here to pursue the purpose that I'm pursuing now. Does that end in the White House? We certainly hope so. Not for ourselves, but for our sense of purpose. But that's God's plan, not ours. But she believes that I am following my purpose, just as I believe she is following her purpose in doing what she does today. And there have been times in our life where, we talked about that cooperative tension. Well, that's a team sport, actually. It's like when, it's like almost an analogy of, Kobe Bryant, right? The way you push his fellow Los Angeles Lakers, they're still part of the same unit. And so, I'll give you an example. When our first son, Karthik, was born, he was born in February of 2020. We had moved to Ohio not long before that, but Apurva was finishing up her final months of training in Columbia and Cornell Hospital, New York Presbyterian's hospital system, to be an ENT. She's the throat surgeon she is today. And you will remember February 2020 was right. He was born on February 23rd of 2020. That's right on the cusp of that first wave of the pandemic in New York City, where, unlike the later waves that were catastrophized, that was a real wave of, in New York City, condensed. Manhattan's hospitals were, for a matter of months, overrun, in the ICUs included. And she has this special skill set as a throat surgeon, but she is 3 weeks into giving birth. She could take as long of maternity leave as she wanted. She felt that this was her duty. Her colleagues were short-staffed. I think one of them was without violating any norms or anything, gently suggesting what kind of trouble they're going through and facing. And she just said, okay, it's my obligation to go back. I'm a biotech CEO. I'm running a successful enterprise, multi-billion-dollar company. But it's 2020. Circumstances have changed. We've brought our first.
Bro, I didn't give my thing. Te digo a ti. Oh, es que se tiene. God, bro, 5 more days. 5 more days. I can't wait to wake up on Saturday night. Hopefully camera, I don't know, bro. Let's go, and then October. Oh, maybe. Let's see. I'm gonna take that. You asshole.